So, Madam Chair, we are live. Oops, sorry. Good morning.
Morning.
Councilor Key, we are live and recording right now. For purposes of our transcriber, just want to do a quick introduction so the voices can be picked up and she knows where we're at. Please.
Paul Coates.
Lori Key, Chair.
Jim Wheatley, Fire Chief.
Fran Cassell, alternate.
Tim McNamara, City Council.
Andrew Hosmer, City Manager.
David Brooks, Deputy City Manager.
And George is online.
George Blake, community member.
And
Victoria Paquin, Deputy Finance Director.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to run the agenda or?
I was going to let you run it, but I'm happy to do it. I can bring it up right now. And
I do have a couple of quick comments to sort of start us off, or do we want to do the minute? Yeah, you tell me what order is.
give me 1 second here and I'll catch up to you. What I will do is, let me start off with our 91A items. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with New Hampshire RSA 91A. It's being conducted in person in the Lebanon City Council chambers. This meeting can also be accessed through the city's virtual platform. Instructions on how to enter the meeting remotely are available on the city's website, lebanon.gov/live. If there are any problems with the individual platform, the meeting will continue as the only legal requirement under RSA 91A is to have a quorum of members present in person. Individuals participating remotely who wish to speak when public comment is allowed can unmute themselves and ask to be recognized by the chair. Individuals attending in person who wish to speak when public comment is allowed can raise their hand to be recognized by the chair. Individuals attending in person should approach the podium at the presenter's table to use the microphone so that everyone in the room and attending virtually can hear. For all individuals speaking either remotely or in person, please state your name and ward of residence in Lebanon or the name of the community where you live. If appropriate, please be prepared to spell your name for the recording secretary.
Okay, great.
Give me 1 second here. Caught me off guard. Okay, so this is the Lebanon Strategic Plan Task Force, August 18th. We started at 8:30 a.m. where, as indicated in the council chambers, we have had the call to order. The agenda item number 2 is the approval of minutes from our August 4th, 2026 meeting. We'll be taking any edits, amendments, motions on regards to the minutes that were provided.
I have a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Second by
I'll
Chief.
second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. All have raised their hands. That passes unanimously. Moving on to old business right now.
So let me just recap, I think, where we left off. Last time we met a couple weeks ago, I think it's important because we did appear to have achieved some consensus on a couple of items. I think beginning with the Strategic Planning Task Force itself, our discussion was that, in fact, this Scope 1 work is really focused on designing a process that enables public input and articulation of an overall vision and provides a development pathway for a strategic plan that is practical, measurable, and provides direction for the 2028 budget cycle priorities and work of the city. And that includes things like the capital improvement work and everything else that encompasses that. So again, we're here for process development. We can certainly provide insights to what will become the strategic planning committee about content, should we have anything that percolates up as a must-do. We also did agree that public input should be available to test the relevancy of the assumptions made in the 2012 master plan. Maybe some of those things have changed. That would change from a shorter-term strategic planning initiative, what the city should do. But definitely want to make sure that issues, goals, and objectives expressed are still relevant to the community. And then I think we also agreed on community input is important in guiding the development of the plan and also in the content of the plan. The content of the plan will go forward with the strategic planning committee. But regardless, we need to build credibility of the plan to the residents. And we need to meet the residents where they live, and we talked about different ways we might do that, such as some community events like the farmers market, citywide surveys, city report card, large forums, small task forces, or focus groups. And I think we also agreed that we should consider an option of identifying maybe a potential external source to assist in the development of the outreach plan, or it could be a larger scope, which would be also, would we want to, consider help with facilitating the design and the content of this strategic plan, not this group doing that work, but this group saying it might be important for the city, the strategic planning committee to consider that, because we have all, can appreciate time, financial, and workforce constraints to push this forward. So those are the things I think that we landed on that were, we all had agreement with, and if everybody, would everybody agree that I have that right?
Yes.
Yes.
So now we get down to the meat of the issue and start thinking about then what are the process steps we may want to consider. There was a couple of things, we had a couple of homework items. Victoria did provide a spreadsheet for some other municipalities that had adopted a strategic plan and/or just a master plan, but there was a handful of different municipalities. Did everybody get a chance to see that? And is there any comments anybody would want to make on that? Yes, George?
Yeah, I really appreciate that she did that homework, and I did spend most of my time on Dover. And contrasting it to the paper that you had, as chair, distributed to us with kind of the initial steps for small communities, I found myself gravitating back to the framework that was provided in that paper rather than, so I'm pretty knowledgeable of improvement frameworks, and they used Baldrige at Dover, and that is the super gold standard, but their resulting document was 175 pages. If they actually are doing all that, it's certainly good. It seemed too much to me. So it was really helpful to see, and I think it represents one extreme of kind of an absolute top of the top brand way of doing it, but I think it's also the most burdensome. And it's a system even big systems like Dartmouth found too burdensome to be pragmatic. So for our size, I really like the pragmatic tone of the original paper, but it was super helpful to look at the spectrum of what's being done out there. Thank you.
Other comments?
I think, Counselor Key, that was one of the challenges with our current strategic plan. It got so broad and it became unmanageable. So I would agree with Dr. Blake that is a real challenge with Dover. If they are doing everything, that's great, but it may be, seems like it would be very challenging to keep in alignment, ideally, the public we serve, the council, the city manager, and all department heads. I mean, I think that's the goal, that we're all working towards a shared vision with agreed upon outcomes that are priorities for us. So trying to find a way that it's pragmatically not only conceived, but also able to implement, so we can, it's a little more easy, it's easier to stay in alignment, and I think that's really critical of what we're trying to do.
And I think this might be a good moment then to bring up, actually, the city manager did provide me some information, you're thinking about maybe having a discussion around what does project success look like? And you had a number of items, and I think those really resonated with me. I think it would be important for our group to understand what is it that we want to provide so that the city can meet project success goals. And so I don't know if that's something you want to share.
I'm happy to share it. I'm going to send this, can I send it over to you, David? And, yeah, you've got it right there. I'll put it up on the screen here. I'm gonna put it up on the screen right now to go over, and these are just my ideas.
Document or the email itself?
I don't have a document, but I can put the email, it'll be fine.
I guess as they do this, what struck me is it is often important to begin thinking about a process that you want to develop from the lens of what do we want this process to actually produce and develop and be the goals of the process. And then it's the goals of the output, which is the strategic plan committee output. If we know what we want that to be, it would be easier for us to develop the steps or say the process points that we would need to provide them in order for them to get there.
I agree, sort of like a good campaign plan or business plan. You know what your goal is, either to win an election, we'll say, or to be profitable. And so why don't we take our goals and then work backwards from really, and how does everything feed into achieving those goals? So maybe we can take a look at definition for project success and see if we all have some agreement on this and what we can either edit out or add to. So no pride in ownership here. But the definition of project success, and when I wrote this, I sort of thought, if we were to put out an RFQ, RFP for a consultant to assist, that entity should know what we're calling success. So reflects meaningful community input. I find that to be the priority of the work that you do, Counselor, and both counselors here. What does the city want to see us become? And we're thinking that starts out, who are we, where are we going, and where do we ideally go to? So I think we need to find a way, and I would reduce this to a timeline right now, and that ideally, let's say, beginning in January of '27, we have public input sessions already planned and in place. Whether they're all in person, whether it's small groups, or whether it's a larger group in a larger area, I really think let's start with that, so we can gather as much input as we can from the public. Does this also include, and I realize the more I throw out here, the more expensive a consultant may be, so we've got to balance that at the appropriate time. But does that include a consultant that comes in and says, we're going to essentially survey the whole city somehow and get meaningful input from people? Because we know if we have a meeting, we pretty much know the 30 people that are definitely going to show up. And that's great that they do. But what about those other 15,000 people that don't ordinarily show up? How do we get some input from them to make sure that this is really a good survey and we've got a nice sample size? It's credible. So I think that's something that we should think about, what that looks like.
I think the other side of that, just interrupt for a second, is
Yeah,
how the survey is crafted is as important as who responds to it. Because they can be self-guiding in many ways. So crafting that survey to get the data you're looking for is as important as who it goes out to.
agreed, absolutely, absolutely. The next point of success, it establishes a clear city council strategic direction. That when this is finally completed, it's the voice of the people who have now let their elected leaders know, these are our priorities, this is where we'd like to see you go. Now, ideally, the council says those are all great ideas and we're going to institute policies that support that. But ultimately, that's up to them to make that vote, and democracy will get that squared away if the people feel that they're not listening to them, right? So, but ultimately, I think, ideally, we'd like the city council to establish a clear city council strategic direction. What we get out of this project is it's a document that provides the city manager and departments with an understandable framework for implementation. So it's nice to have a document that means everything to everybody and lots of aspirational goals, but really, how do I, or any city manager, take it and make it digestible for my department heads so they can build budgets and they can have missions that are consistent and aligned. Establishes a limited number of meaningful priorities. This is contrast to what we have right now, which was lots of priorities, but really, let's sugar these down a bit and say, look, this is a 3 to 5 year plan that is constantly being updated, and really, this is something that we should have. It's nice to get validation and sort of check some boxes. So it's okay if we take low-hanging fruit and say, we're gonna take a step here and we're gonna check that box, whatever that may be, but make sure that they're meaningful priorities and identify measurable desired outcomes. You know, I think it's, oops, go ahead.
No, it's this.
Oh, is that you? Sorry. Measurable desired outcomes. I think we have a lot of tension and good tension in the city talking about, do we want more housing? If so, where? And the added costs associated with more people living in our city, are we equipped to handle those additional costs just through the revenues driven by property taxes? I think there's tension there, and I think it's great because I think you have to have that tension to have a meaningful discussion. Because philosophically speaking, we say, oh, of course, if you build more housing, you get more tax dollars, and we can, but does that really, is that really how it works out? And I think we have to have that frank discussion. So the tension there is really good. How does this new document inform our annual operating budget recommendations? It should be something that I can share with all department heads, much like was done a few months ago when the council said to me, CPIU, and if you need to go above CPIU or thereabouts, you need to justify why you need to go above that. But that direction is really helpful to anyone sitting in my seat and instructing department heads on how they want to prepare a budget. Informs our capital improvement planning and prioritization. We know we've got almost $100 million of items sitting in the parking lot that we are not funding right now. Whether we, in our lifetime of service, ever choose to fund those, I don't know. But next generation should know that these are things that we have identified. We believe they need to get done, and an investment has to come at some point. Now, maybe that parking lot grows, maybe it contracts, I don't know, but we should be able to at least have that discussion and know that really we're just stewards and we're handing it off to the next generation and preparing for good fiscal management of the city. It'll guide department work plans and resource allocation. One thing I've done with all of my departments right now is ask them to start preparing their what are called work plans. How does their work on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis support the mission of their department? And is that mission in alignment with what I see as the goals of the city? And does that reflect the city council, which then reflects the public? I'm looking for alignment there. Creates transparent accountability for progress. You know, the one thing that we want to lose the public's faith in us and trust in us, got something that appears a little funny, opaque, and the public can't really drill down and get a good understanding of it. I think it's a sure way to lose the public trust and to create an obstacle where this document that we work on, strategic plan, it no longer becomes functional and valuable. So we need to make sure that every step along the way, we are bringing as much transparency as we can. Establishes an achievable process for annual review. That is really important in how the council holds the city manager, and the city manager holds his or her department heads responsible. And that there's got to be a standard there with priorities for the city manager to achieve, and on an annual basis, you've got to be able to measure up to what the expectations are. Much like the city manager asking department heads, these are my expectations for you, and you need to measure up on an annual basis or not. And then a document that remains actively used throughout the 3 to 5 year planning. The last thing we want to do is create a strategic plan, and we've all seen this in the work that we do in various areas. We spend a lot of money, we spend a lot of effort, and we get a beautiful document, and it sits on the shelf and it gets dusty, only to come out maybe once a year. And this is not a reflection of any previous administration or any work, but it only comes out once a year for that academic exercise to go through it and maybe update it and tinker with it and present it again. In my mind, there's limited value in that. We have limited hours, we have limited resources. Really, we need to create something that on a monthly basis, I can go to a department head and say, let's talk about your priorities and let's see how it stacks up against our strategic plan. And you need to be able to call me on an annual or semi-annual feedback session. We'll say, Mr. City Manager, where do you stand in the priorities that we set out for you? And I ought to be able to answer those satisfactorily. So these are some of the things I think about. How does this project look? How do we put successful benchmarks in here that this becomes a good, pragmatic, functional document?
Do we have comments?
I think it's a great outline. I think it's a really great outline. And it certainly gives us, I think, a framework to design the process. If these are, in fact, the desired outcomes, this is very helpful, I think.
So I wanted to just circle back to actually, Councilor McNamara, your previous comment about, the public input. And I think what would be useful for the strategic planning committee and for us in the design, because I love the idea that we would end our work with having a plan for community input, even if that includes the plan we need an architect, a consultant architect to help us design the plan. But I think we have to be really careful about what questions do we want answered from the public. And if we look at that, because I'll go back to our last meeting, what was, I thought, very important point was we need to validate what the city currently believes are the desires of our residents. It's an old document, the master plan is, and the master plan was built off of sustainability plan, or I forget, it was sustainability something, in 2009. So, and the master plan's 2012. So for me, part of what we want to get from the public is a validation or lack of validation that those things that were currently, we're assuming are still relevant. And I don't know, because I think we can't, the tricky part for this whole thing for me is you can't create a great strategic plan if you don't really understand what the vision is. Mm-hmm. So we have to do, externally to the update of the master plan, we do have to get the information from our community about what their vision is, and then that second part is, and how would we achieve that vision? What are the things we would do, which would obviously help the development of a strategic plan? These are the concrete things we're going to do in order to meet that vision. But I do think that's going to be important for us to revalidate or reassess where residents are in their vision for the city, which is one of the things that came up around the 120 zoning
Right.
issue. Like, what is it we really want? Your point, Andrew, about, what about housing? What is the best way to create housing or whatever that fits a bigger vision of maybe fiscal accountability and in property tax management, all those other things are all going to play in. So we have to, I think, come up with a list of what kinds of questions we would want, whatever the public input sessions are, whatever way we do it, what do we want answered?
So just a couple of quick comments on that. One, jump back to 2008 for a minute. There was a fairly significant controversy in 2008 by the then it was involved the then council of, what is our initial guiding, our principal guiding principle. And that's where the residents first policy came up. And my sense is that has not changed. And that's probably where you start. And it's it's right in there in the guiding principles to the master plan. All actions and policies of the government of the city of Lebanon shall be intended first and foremost to benefit the current residents of Lebanon. I don't think that has changed, in my opinion, over time. When you get below that into the sort of subset of guiding principles, I think some of those may have not necessarily been deleted, but have been altered a little bit. And I think it would be worth our time to take a look at those. But then getting back to your question of how do we, what do we want answered in whatever form we take to solicit this input from the public, I think equally as important for the committee that succeeds us is to how are those questions framed and what information is provided to help someone make a decision on that question, because you can get completely different answers depending upon how you frame the question.
Absolutely, you can.
And so I see that as critical. For me, that may be the core reason to want to bring in someone from the outside, not so much to facilitate conversations as to help craft the questions in such a way that you get honest, informed answers.
Other comments?
An observation that I have, and I think it's one that I have had for quite some time, and many citizens have, is the issue of priorities. I think what happens is people look at what we're doing as a city or what we're trying to accomplish, and they get confused, and I don't want to cite any particular projects, but they seem to get confused with why this project is done and this project is not done, and why are we doing this and not that. So I think if you're going to get people engaged, you have to let them speak about what they see as priorities for the city, and that is going to be very difficult to do. Keeping in mind that at election time we get 1,600 voters to come out and vote. Getting people involved for comment is incredibly difficult. So you're going to have to, we are going to have to create something that really hits their appetite and gets them engaged to want to respond to this. Because I've heard a lot of complaining. There's not a lot of action along with the complaints from the people that are complaining. So if we're going to get them involved, we've got to hit the spots that I think are hot. And I think priorities is a big issue. And we have to set those, that's a very difficult thing. It's just like the master plan speaks to a resident-first community. Well, that's true, but that's somewhat ambiguous. What defines resident, what actions can we take that defines a resident-first philosophy? So, and I think one of those is priorities. So that's my thought. I think you've got to get something out there that they're going to want to respond to. So that is priorities is a big way to get that done, I think.
I have to leave for a doctor's appointment. Deputy City Manager Brooks will remain.
Sounds good.
Okay, but thank you for your work on this.
Okay.
Gonna make
Yes.
a comment too, to say, agree with these comments. The setting of priorities is going to be a key challenge, even in this initial survey or community input gathering exercise that we do. I'm gonna think back to, David Brooks would know firsthand more than anybody, but our downtown Lebanon visioning study, which gathered quite a bit of community input as part of the exercise. I believe our challenge that the community doesn't want to face is just to be bringing them into a room or into a survey that just makes the sky the limit. Like, for instance, if we were to look at the existing strategic plan or master plan and say, all right, tell us from within these documents, where should our priorities be? Where should we start? It's all too overwhelming, and that's been a common theme that we've recognized already just in this room. Everything's overwhelming because there's 14 different departments, all with numerous different objectives to be accomplished. And so I think what the community is going to do is respond to leadership, whether they're going to support the decisions that are being made by leadership or they're going to be adverse to it. There's going to be a response to something that we put out. And I think one of the things that we saw from the paper that we read in our second meeting, the Strategic Planning and Small Communities Manual, was that in process, this committee would have, or in the other communities, we would have done some of the initial work to try to refine what are we really talking about doing here, so that we're not giving them the entire pie. We're giving them something to digest, something that is digestible, and asking them from that point, can you help us think about what are the priorities going to need to end up being, and give them some actual talking points that don't just make, well, I want the airport to be this from one person, and another person thinking solely about recreation and parks, and another person thinking about another thing way over here. We've got to do some kind of initial work to make this palatable and not overwhelming to anybody who's bringing in a survey or bringing in whatever our community input's got to be. And I think that was one of the things that was done really well with the visioning study, was we didn't just say, all right, tell us everything you'd want to do with the downtown Lebanon district. Instead, we spent the time and the energy to think about, these are several options that you can choose from, but that helps us really get the most that we can out of a community input session.
Yeah, I think it helped frame the discussion, as you just alluded to, by giving, and I think we did this with the back parking lot project as well, where we came up with sort of 2 or 3 or 4 different scenarios, and it helped frame what we thought might be possible, and then you can pick and choose what you like or don't like about a given one without just being overwhelmed with anything and everything is possible. So I think that's a valuable point.
George, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to corroborate the 2 comments that were just made, and it fits with what I believe you were saying as chair, that validating is kind of a useful way to think about how you get community input. You're putting something to them and getting affirmation or complaints. So I think this thematically, we're all in agreement that we want as much community input as possible. Things like priorities will miss the mark if we don't do that. And at the same time, we're going to have to do it in a way and having some expert guidance on how to do that and starting with things. People do a better job critiquing than generating something de novo. So give people something to critique and you'll get a lot more input. The last thing I would say is more of a question, and it's an assumption. I'm curious if anyone here can validate or negate. Do the existing department leaders all have some way that they're fielding complaints from the community about things that are, not going well? That's sort of free data about, maybe things that are going well and not going well. What you're not hearing about is potholes, and what you are hearing about is something else. So I'd be curious what's available now that maybe could be tapped into.
Yeah, I can speak as a department head that certainly there is an avenue, as simple as conversations on the street and passing, to formal phone calls, to emails through the OpenGov system for reporting, stuff like that. I think that, again, all of that has to be, you have to be careful to measure that to exactly the source that it's coming from and the event that may have led to that complaint. But certainly as a department head, I hear goods and bads of what's going on across all departments in the city, not just my own department.
Yeah, so that might be a way to have a starting point of some things to validate or test. It's concrete info about the status quo, and the community was motivated enough to complain or take some action. So that's voting with your voice. There might be other ways that you have data around things like parks and actual activity. Are people going there, right? What are things that the city's invested in that's getting used a lot or not so much? And so I don't know if that data also would help, but it's often a starting point for this kind of thing.
There was, I don't know how relevant this is, but there was an article in the Valley News about, I think it was Randolph, and they're having a problem with their library budget. And so they're on sort of try number 3 to get a library budget passed. And one of the things that they really have realized when, I think they started at a place where the library budget was going to be, the request was like 30% increase in the whole library budget. It was a large number. And then there was, well, the city could do this amount, and that didn't pass. And so now they're doing this sort of hybrid thing where they'll say what the basic budget should be, and here's a carve out of, I don't know if it's $30,000 or $40,000 for some sort of maintenance thing. Would you pass this basic library budget? And then secondarily, would you then also pass this additional appropriation for this specific thing? And I wonder if it's a way that you might look at, instead of having to go 3 times around to get to what the right answer is, because they don't know if some people aren't passing a budget because it's not high enough, or are they not passing a budget because it's not low enough. So this was a way for them to actually answer the question. Is it the basic budget that's the problem, or is it an appropriation for a specific thing? That's the problem of passing it. But I don't know if there's a lesson learned there where we could think about how would you, I'm going back, Paul, to your points. If you don't have some sort of guardrails on something, like everybody would want, yes, I want this, yes, I want that, yes, I want this. Okay, so we've got, 20 things people want, but we know we can't afford those 20 things. So it's how do you frame each one of what it, I don't know if it's monetarily or what percentage of people use a certain thing that the city offers. I don't know what it would be, but what kind of data would you put in front of somebody that might make it, they could make a better answer to that question, instead of just the sky is open, everything's available,
Yeah.
you know.
So we had this discussion briefly in the council, and we still have to resolve it at some point, about an internal issue here at the city, and it has also to do with recreation, and it's the ski jump. And this sort of frames what you're saying, I think, about the library in Randolph. So we have a ski jump, it's really cool, there aren't many in New Hampshire, but there's only a sort of a very limited high school jumping program. There's history, there's tradition, but fixing the jump is very expensive. Alternatively, do you take those funds and do you put them towards something that would be more actively used? Do you turn Storrs Hill into a tubing hill at some, for some portion of the season or the week, which might get much more usage than people watching a ski jump. But again, you have a limited pot of resources to devote to Storrs Hill. Where do you put them? And so I think that's an interesting way to frame that type of question of, here are the limitations. Here are the options. What does the public want to see?
Right.
Because those are the sort of hard decisions that, we frequently have to make on the council. And Paul's familiar with these with rec. I mean, there's always hard decisions.
Yeah. I don't disagree. It's thought that we have to put into this thing in order to get, can we see your visioning? What that looked like? Like, was there it was a,
Oh, the downtown Lebanon.
The downtown Lebanon vision study?
yeah,
Yes, I think, well, the report is still public. I believe it's on the site. It's,
no, I mean, can we see how you designed it?
yeah, I think the process is outlined in the report.
Okay,
And that would be valuable to review. Certainly not to read the whole report, that would bog us down, but there's good process review within the report.
Yeah, I can send out a link to that.
That'd be
Make sure it's still available on the website. Should be.
And this, I would suggest that what we're doing here and how we designed it is much more challenging than some of the similar things we've done in the past. So the West Lebanon visioning study, and David and I took part in the public part of it up at Seminary Hill School, was in a way a lot simpler because we were focusing on a limited area,
right,
right? How do we revitalize downtown West Lebanon? That's one thing. But what we're talking about here now involves the entire city and every activity that the city conducts. And so, again, that's where I'm thinking that the assistance of an entity that really knows how to do this would be helpful.
and we're thinking not in terms of a particular so revitalizing downtown West Lebanon is very, okay.
Yeah.
That's its thing. We're up here thinking, what are the, main things that are important to you to live in the city of Lebanon?
Right.
And so that's how we have to sort of,
Could I take a second of our time and talk about these principles for a minute? And just read them, because I think this is now we're 2012 now, based on a 2008 policy, which was residents first. And the guiding principles that came out in 2012 were supportive smart growth principles. Well, I would argue smart growth is sort of a fuzzy term. It meant one thing in 2008. It may mean something completely different in 2027. So, okay, I'm all for smart growth, but we need to define it, or it needs to be defined. Improvement of civic participation and transparency in government through better communication and varied manageable opportunities for involvement. I think this is what we've been talking about. So that one rings true to me. Consideration of the impact of new development on city services. Boy, that's certainly is current. Development of a comprehensive multimodal transportation plan. We've gone back and forth over time on this. We've spent a lot of money on multimodal transportation. I'm not sure how much of a priority that is today, or if the public feels like we've accomplished a lot of the multimodal stuff. Improvement of bikeways, walkways, and public transit systems, recreational commuter corridors. I'm not sure what that means. I think it falls under multimodal transportation, but it apparently was a big deal then. Stewardship of natural and recreational areas, I don't think that's significantly changed. I think we're gonna have a healthy debate about how much of the city should be conserved versus how much should be utilized. And lastly, balance between environmental sustainability and landowner rights. That's one that hasn't come up in a while that I know of, but I think that relates back in 2012 of zoning versus how to sustainably utilize property. I'd have to read some more to figure out what the background of that is. But of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guiding principles, I see at least 3 that I think are pretty much ring true today.
Absolutely.
The others
You know, I'm looking at this, and I want to say there's the guiding principles of the city council, and I don't know that if it's the same residents first thing, but there was a debt management plan, fiscal. I mean, it's interesting to me, those are things that are great, but it doesn't really get into, I think what is on a lot of people's mind is the stabilization of property taxes.
Right, so that, I mean, a lot of us lived here in 2008. That wasn't the first thing in our mind. It has certainly come to the forefront significantly since then, and for a lot of reasons. The cost of things that we need to buy for the city, the participation by the state has diminished significantly since 2008. So I think that's a guiding principle that could certainly be added because it has come to the forefront.
Right.
And maybe some of these other ones move back a bit, or they've been accomplished, or they've been at least partially accomplished.
Yeah, so, and again, it gets back to prioritization. Are each one of those items equal in importance? Or is there a way that it would be more useful for a strategic plan to know which ones take on more of a priority than others?
Yeah, and that, again, this is the master plan, it supposedly is up here, and we're more in the
Right.
implementation phase, so that's where I think it is appropriate to prioritize.
Yeah,
Now, whether they get prioritized in the master plan ultimately is another question, but. they
and
need
it's
to-
not our work,
They
yeah,
need to be in sync.
yeah.
Yeah, can I just comment on that last
Sure.
statement? They need to be in sync. Again, I apologize, I missed the last meeting, you may have already talked about this. But to me, coming up through the planning side of things and the master plan, long before there was a strategic plan, I think it's crucial that we both of these documents, all of our documents and actions, be working toward the same goal, the same vision for the community. To the extent that we, on this committee, set up a process where we undergo and seek out public input about what community wants for the vision, we need to, I think we have an opportunity and maybe a need to try to use that same process for both the master plan and the strategic plan, so that we don't have a year or two or however long it takes between doing these separate documents where we're working on two different visions.
We talked about that, doing
We
it
did.
simultaneously.
Perfect, at least for the visioning process.
For the visioning, we
And
do,
a sort of a retreat type thing that was talked about in the strategic planning for small communities. That's the same process we used for the master plan back in 2008-9, where we set up camp at the high school.
Yep, I remember.
For a whole weekend, and then that spun off into small groups for each individual chapter over the course of weeks. I don't know how many weeks, I don't remember. But I think it's crucial that we all be working, that both of these documents be working toward the same vision statement and the same goal about what we want to achieve and what we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years.
Otherwise, it's wasted time.
Otherwise, yeah, and then we're going to be we're gonna be confusing ourselves and confusing the public, like, this document says we wanna go here, this document says we wanna go there, and which one are we following, and what are we doing? So I would stress that to the extent it hasn't already been stressed.
Yeah, no, it is a great point, and it was one that we discussed, that it's a sticky point right now, because is this group working and this ongoing work on the master plan? And what I don't see in the master plan is, unless this is what it would be, what their vision is overall. Each chapter has a vision, but there's not an overall overarching vision. We could say, let's start there, because it doesn't exist. So we need to, that's why it does need to be done. And it's great that we have this pathway to get it done, but it's got to service both documents.
Can I say that I think that this document, this master plan that was created in 2008 was incredibly good. I mean, the input that you received back then is outstanding. I mean, a lot of these things are, as Tim has pointed out, are still relevant today. And the only problem we have is that we're not finishing the job. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a incredibly good document with incredibly good ideals, and we're just missing the boat on the connection. So somehow we have to make that connect through this shorter term strategic plan to follow. This is constitutional. That's how good this is, I think. And I have to ask you a question. Was there more public involvement in 2008 than there is today? I mean, because this is well done. I mean, incredibly well done. And it couldn't have been just the counselors.
So, no, it wasn't. I mean, as David said, I remember the sessions at the high school as being attended by huge, we used up, what, 10 classrooms or something? I mean, it was,
And the weekend, the overall session,
yeah,
the visioning weekend session was a couple, several hundred people.
Yeah.
300
it
people.
was a big deal.
Well, maybe we should learn a lesson from that somehow and say, if we're looking for this, if we narrow it down to a few very important priorities and have the same kind of an effort, I'm not convinced we will get that same participation. I'll tell you, I have worked very hard trying to get people involved in the city. I have spent a lot of time talking to just about anybody that will listen to me, which there aren't very many people, by the way. But it is like pulling teeth to get people to contribute. And I don't see how we can get better unless we get that participation. When I ran Storrs Hill Ski Area, I was on the move getting people, hey, what are you doing? Why don't you get involved? And we had a nice little running engine back then. And it's just not as easy to pull people out today. It's just incredible. So.
This is an area I think where an expert, again, could be helpful, because I think, in the limited memory I have anymore, that it is a very different world than it was in 2008.
It is.
I mean, 2008 was a sort of a pre-internet world in a lot of ways. People communicated differently. There was more one-on-one communication. And I think demographically, it was a different community. Now, we weren't that much smaller. In 2008, we were, I could look back, but it's probably about 12,000 people. But the percentage of people that were homeowners was much higher. I mean, we didn't have as high a rental population.
Right.
And it's not their fault, but a rental population, particularly a short-term rental, tends to be more disengaged, right? So I think that's difficult. You've also seen in this 18 years an increase of about 3,000 folks or so who are residents. That has changed the status quo to some extent. So you've got some demographic changes. You've got the old folks or old school Lebanon folks versus the new Lebanon folks and there's been some, not really conflict, but there's been some disagreement there in priorities. So it's a very different world, and I think to be effective, we have to be able to understand and respond to those changes that we know have occurred since 2008, and how do we best solicit input in this new world we have. And the other thing I'll speak to lastly, Lori, is prioritization is absolutely important. I mentioned, I think that taxes really weren't on people's mind as much in 2008. You just didn't see it. It is a big deal today, and so how do we best address what people want to do with the limited resources we have?
Exactly, that is exactly it, because people do feel like that, all the apples have been picked from the tree. So this is basically now where we are, and we're gonna have to live within this budget.
Right.
That's the feedback I get. We can't just keep throwing on more. We gotta now figure out how to live within this budget. And I don't know if that would get me to a meeting. If I heard the meeting was about how are we gonna live within our budget that we have today, knowing that costs always go up, but living, no new initiatives, living within what we have, what would then be, or, would that get people out? I think if they thought there was a win for them, like, smaller incremental increases in our taxes would get me to a meeting to say, okay, I'm ready. You've seen it in the public meetings at the high school for the budget where somebody would get up and say, I really like this service, but we can't afford it anymore. I mean, there are citizens that would say, I want to stay in my house first and foremost. So, yeah, I'm willing to give up stuff, but we don't know what people would give up or what people would want more of.
We do, but I think, and I don't disagree with you, but I take a step back from even the budgetary part of it into, what is the overriding priority, right? If the overriding priority is not, I fund the fire department over rec, the overriding priority is, how the heck do I stay in my house? Or how the heck, if I don't want to stay in my house, do I stay in Lebanon in a place that's acceptable to me? At the meetings at the high school, I hear a lot of, I'll chair this department or that department, but without a complete sort of overall understanding. We're going to have a discussion tomorrow night at council about the elderly exemptions, right? 18 years ago, the elderly exemptions really helped people to stay in their homes. If you look at those elderly exemptions today, it's like, yeah, if you have more than, $10,000 in savings, you can't do this. If you don't have $10,000 in savings, you're dead.
Yeah,
So, what do we do about that?
right.
And the flip side of that is, okay, if we promote the elderly exemptions and we we expand them, it's gonna cost everybody else more. So, how do you deal with those conflicting things? But I think the overall, to me anyway, one of the overall things that I've heard from constituents is, I'm scared, how do I stay in my house? It's not so much do I fund the fire department or recreation.
Exactly.
It
is.
How
that.
do I stay here? I'm afraid.
We knew that from the Finance Advisory Committee solicitation of that petition. That is the number one thing people came up and said. I can't
Absolutely.
have a
1,200.
child here. I can't stay here. I'm old. I've lived my third generation of my family in this house. I can't stay here anymore. That is the environment that we are in right now, trying to do this work.
Chairperson, yeah, I'm resonating with Councilor McNamara's comments about how do we return to that level of public involvement in this process. And I think we have, we talked about a SWOT analysis early in this conversation. I do think that one of the major strengths that we already have as a community is that people who do live here love living in our community. I mean, that's why people are so passionate about wanting to stay here and being able to afford to stay here. But that's where that comment generates is, I want to be able to stay here. They do care about this place. They need to know that their voice matters, and they need to have an ability to articulate their voice in a way that A, will be heard and know that they have something specific that they can contribute towards that end. And people are very busy. I think we're in a different environment as a whole than we were in 2008 because people are generally busier. We find volunteerism is down in the recreational world. It's definitely more difficult to get people to fill the roles that we need filled compared to it was 10 years ago, even 10 years ago. We also have some other strengths that I think that are really key in this, though, and that is I'm hearing some real appreciation for where the master plan is, the document for what it was in its day and continues to be. Whether it's relevant is our question, or has the same level of relevancy. But we have a very good document that was built on solid data and public input. We have a desire for this new strategic plan to sync with the master plan, and so we have to be careful about where's the potential for those things to diverge from one another. And we have this deep desire for this level of public input. I would propose that we end up having two different levels of public input, or two different sessions, so to speak. One to get us to make sure that our vision that was in place through the sustaining principles, through any other guiding documents that the city employed during the building of the master plan, that we synthesize some of the key elements from the master plan and then go to the community and say, how relevant are these still to you today? And where do we find that we need to update some of these thoughts? So the critique of what was really at the core of establishing the master plan. I'm not proposing that we give the public the master plan and say, tell us what you would keep and what you would throw away. I'm saying we would have to do some hard work to synthesize what are the key elements in there. You talked about visions for every chapter. Maybe that's where we start. And just, all right, what are those visions for each of the chapter? How much can we condense those into meaningful nuggets that people can respond to, and find a way to get that out into the public so that we can coalesce around, this is what the public says, this is what we as city leadership says, going through all the different committees within the city and advisory groups and everything else, and say, can we boil this down, maybe use a retreat for the team that's building this plan to look at that data and then launch from there, but at least get us to this place where we can say, this is what we're going to build the strategic plan on. Because we have that as an opportunity and a strength right now with that master plan. Let's build on that asset. I think we have an opportunity to do that. And I think that we do have, if we can find a way to tap into people's passion about wanting to be in this community, we're going to be able to get those responses. I think we're just going to take a lot more legwork to go out and actually meet people in their living rooms. That was the Mascoma River Greenway model. Was, I can't tell you how many living rooms we sat in to help broadcast and share a vision and get response. But it's living rooms. It might be that kind of thing where we have to just go to people. We've cited a couple different mechanisms to doing that. There's endless more. There's ball fields and games, and there's libraries, and there's bus stops, and there's all kinds of places where we can do these sort of things.
All right.
Yes.
So I agree with you, Paul, on that, except that the strategic plan, or the 3 to 5 year plan that we're hoping to tie into the current master plan some way, we have to get that information, we have to get that public input about any changes to the master plan. But the strategic plan, if I'm not understanding this correctly, let me know, but is more of, it will be an operational plan, and all of our department heads are waiting for some direction right now, because we don't have a strategic plan that we're utilizing the way that we have been utilizing it. So I think, although we have to tie comments to both plans, and both plans have to speak to one another, I think we have a very good master plan at the beginnings and maybe needing some changes. But the strategic plan that I think we're going to move, the charge that we're going to send forward to the committee is going to be the operational plan, a tool that will be used as an operational plan. So that is imminent. That is we're talking about 10,000 foot level, 5,000 foot level. So the master plan is 10,000 feet. We're more 3,000 feet because we really have a city to run at the same time, or the city managers have a city to run. So I think that's a good plan, and I think we can somehow coordinate both public inputs that way, but we can't lose focus on what I interpret as the immediate need, which is something that our city managers, our department heads can move forward with. So I would be, and to your comment, Tim, taxes, my tax bill monthly is more than my mortgage payment was. So there is a lot of concern about that. And I'm going to close with this last comment. There isn't a person in this room that I don't believe there's a person in this room that doesn't want all the goods and services and all of the things that we provide here in Lebanon. But we have to think differently about how we fund all of that. And I am beating this, I've been beating it for 2 years. We have to take our city councilor hats off, our committee member hats off, and we have to be a little more entrepreneurial in what we do, because we cannot sustainably continue to hit the taxpayers for more money year after year. And we have the opportunity here in Lebanon to look at a number of areas that might make it better and easier for funding other than taxes. And Andrew and I have had a couple of conversations. I have talked about the enterprise funds, and I'm going to continue looking at those because those are two big pockets, and I think we have to make some decisions there. But anyway, down the road, long term, that's more down the road, that's more 10,000 foot level, but I think we have many various communities in this city now, and we have to accommodate everybody, and it can't be done by 8,200 or 8,300 taxpayers. So
One of the problems, I think, that at least, maybe it's a problem and not a problem, it just is what it is we have people who have put their sort of roots down, and then we have, and that it could be through long-term rentals, or it could be through, you own your house, right? And then we have this larger population of, I would say, transient rentals. They're only going to be here for a year or two, whatever their training is, or whatever their visiting nurse contract is. Or, or people that are just commute in here to work and go home somewhere else, and it's not meaningful to them what's happening in Lebanon. But so we have to figure out who's the audience here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that, knowing who the audience is would help with the design of how would you get those people. Like sitting in someone's living room is an audience. The city manager and I know very well what sitting in somebody's living room is, because a whole neighborhood came together about an issue in their neighborhood, and they were all willing to come together and meet with us to talk about what the issue was.
Standing at the library.
And yeah, so I think understanding, and then it's a scope issue, but who do we really want to get opinions from?
Yeah, so that's a loaded topic. That's the problem, is that, if you look at the master plan, it talks about, residents versus current Lebanon residents. Well, you could be a short-term resident, or you could be a long-term resident. So, a lot of us want to gravitate towards long-term residents because we are, but, we can't have the overriding say there are people who live here are going to necessarily be short-term. Shouldn't they have some input as well? I just don't know how we deal with that. I just want to, recognizing the time, we've kind of been talking about the old business items. The one item we had for new business today is the discussion of the RFQ
Yeah,
for public engagement services and qualifications. I want to make sure we get to that.
that's good point. And actually, we can get to that because Andrew's returned.
Yes.
Before we change topics, I just wanted to point out and just add to the fact that I think there's a lot of people that are in our community that work here. They would love to live here if they had an opportunity to. So the idea that we're limiting it to current residents, whether they're short-term or long-term, I think misses a whole group of people that would like to contribute. They would love to live here if there was an affordable place to do so, or any place to do so, for that matter. So I think that's an important sector that we need to be aware of.
It is. We still need to operate under the residents first policy as adopted in 2008. That hasn't been rescinded. So we have to operate under that policy.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
I guess my pushback on that is, not that I wouldn't want their opinion, honestly, that the people that want to live here, let's just assume there are people that want to live here. I know there's people that want to live here and can't. Anybody who works in Lebanon knows they have people in their office or in their workspace who would prefer to live here. So I think that's sort of a given thing, and I wouldn't know how to outreach to them as well. And I don't know if the yield would be as useful, but I will take the point that Councilor McNamara just made, that it is a residents first, that is one of the policies. But that one policy line, residents first, is one of, there was like 6 or 8 things in that list of that 2008 document. I just want to point that out. That's where the fiscal accountability and debt management were highlighted in that same document. Not a big problem for us for here. It's just for your own knowledge, maybe it would be good for everybody to go back and read that too.
All this seems to be pointing to that same guiding principle that, again, I'm going to refer back to the paper that we read, but mission, vision, values precede goals and strategies. So to the degree where even those sort of principles, if one of our values is residents first, that becomes something that we can gather more public input about. What does that mean? What part of that do we most want to focus on? Or what subset of people do we most want to focus on? I think all of these comments are pointing to that need to really put these back in front of the community and in front of our leadership that's already in place to gather some kind of response to those things. And even your comment, Fran, about we have to rethink the way that we fund the activities that go on in the city. Right, and that is an example of a value and a principle that that you're holding, and is an opportunity for us to put that in front of the entire community and gather as much input on that, because if that's going to become one of our values and visions for where we need to go with the strategic plan, then that's great. But it is a preconceived value and principle that maybe very well that's going to be one of the things that we're asking people to comment on, but it starts still there. I don't think we can even go into this process assuming that that's what people are going to say. Very well, it seems like things point towards that, but this is where we need to be able to get that input.
I actually think you make a very good point, and it does kind of remind me of doing this work, is understanding what the values are is really, maybe that's really what you solicit. What are your values? And everything else comes after that, because then you can set a vision that makes those values come to life. So it's your lived experience. It's a very important point, I think. George, would you have anything to say about that?
No, as we switch to the other topic, maybe I'll make a transitional comment. Everything that we've been talking about actually is pretty anchored in that document you had us read that I referenced at the beginning. And the items that are the initial steps, the phase one work for developing a strategic plan. Getting leadership support, we've got that because we just got established, this task force. Establishing a planning committee, which we are going to define how the phase two committee is established. So we've talked about that. Determining the level of community engagement, that's been this topic. We're going in order and we're basically picking off, the trade-off considerations. So I just think this has been very valuable. It's very concrete. And if we look at the other steps, preferences for facilitation, that's why I said this is a lead in to the next topic. I think we have a roadmap here. We definitely have to provide meat on the bones, but so it's maybe not a detailed comment about the last thing, but overall, I think we're making real progress towards what this group is supposed to be doing. And I'm interested in hearing about preferences for facilitation and what a request for facilitators would look like.
Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Blake, for sort of introducing that. As I think I alluded to before, in my humble opinion, I think we would be better off with a solicitation that dealt with getting that public input rather than a retreat, right? I mean, a retreat is of necessity internal. It's the group getting together in a facilitated session, deciding what it wants to do. I think we've done a lot of that already. To me, the value in an outside consultant now, as I've said before, is to solicit that public opinion. And so if I'm looking at RFP, that's what I'm looking at instead of some sort of facilitated internal communication. That'd be my preference. We have limited resources, that's where I'd put them.
I think I agree with you, actually. I've been thinking about that. I think you've proven as a city that you can bring people together to actually do that. But it's helping us design the content and all of that. Like, I mean, honestly, I think that's where the value would really come in.
I would also suggest, and I'm glad Dr. Blake mentioned Dover. I have a family connection in Dover, and I was pretty good friends with their mayor for a number of years. And I visited down there. They've done an amazing job. I would love to literally talk to the folks in Dover and say, okay, how'd you do this? What was effective? What wasn't effective? Because they are a really good example. And that's, you don't need an outside consultant necessarily for that. You can go to the folks in Dover and say what worked and what didn't.
One of the things that is worth highlighting, they used and they specify the group for doing their survey, and they seem to have pretty good response. So there is an outside body who did at least their broader survey, which hits to the point you were previously making of how you frame questions is incredibly important, and having expertise is worthwhile to bring someone in to help with that.
Yeah. So you have, you provided us some, or me, I don't know if you sent it to the group, some samples of the RFP or RF.
Qs and Ps. Ps and Qs.
P's and Q's, yeah. And one of them stipulated they did want specifically information on a public engagement strategy. I think it was Berkeley that had that one, which I thought was important. But I think taking a look at those and seeing, you could cherry pick from each one, what would be most useful, we think would be most useful for our effort.
So how about after this meeting, I send out the 4 that I sent to you yesterday, and maybe as a plan for the next meeting, everyone, that will be the homework, that we'll do that, and we can take what we like from those documents, decide if they're germane to the work that we want to do, and include them. We can probably do that even at the meeting by just cutting and pasting and building it out.
Okay.
A couple of things that I like there. There is one city or town that used a scoring matrix, which didn't seem to be too complicated. A total of 100 points, and as let's say we read through them, or the committee reads through them, we grade them out. I really liked that, to give some guidance. Also, there was a request in a couple of them, I think, that said, in the past 3 to 5 years, have you completed something like this for a municipality? And if so, how did it not just become something you leave on the bookshelf? Is there a track record that it actually was implemented and was at least working to some extent?
Yeah.
So some ideas like that I thought, like, oh, that would be, I hadn't thought about it, and I'm like, that would be really good. Show us your track record. Sort of have those. So I'll get those out after this meeting to everybody to look at. And thinking more about how we put a little meat on the bone too. It'll be interesting if we get to this point and put out an RFP, RFQ, and we have an opportunity to sit with a couple of people or companies that respond to it and sort of ask them some of these tough questions to help us get a better understanding of their capabilities, and also learn from them too, if they've got experience in this area. Say, this works, these questions don't work, engagement, just we can get them to share some of their secrets too. So whoever we pick, we can build it into stuff.
Yeah, definitely. We have 10 minutes left. Is there anything that we haven't discussed or ideas for the next meeting that we should make sure gets put on the agenda?
How about for the agenda, let's also work on a real hard timeline from January 1st through June 30th.
Yeah.
And just let's build that out so we know exactly, that's important part of the scaffolding we're gonna put in place. The other item I might suggest, Madam Chair, is what does this committee look like? And one of the things I was thinking about earlier was that, there's a lot of parallel overlapping work that could occur with the master plan. How do we make sure someone from planning is attending these meetings, so we have those clear definitions of what the master plan is, where they're going with it, the work that we're doing, and where we're going with it, so we don't have a silo. So as we think about what should our committee look like and where should some of the members from the community come from, we might want to sort of get specific about that.
Yeah, I agree.
So should we have someone like Mark Goodwin? Is that what you're maybe suggesting? Because
Somebody, I'm not sure who, but somebody from that department that,
he's
yeah,
been
I'm not-
intimately involved in the master
20
plan.
plus years.
Yeah, so I think that it's invaluable experience right at our fingertips. So that's a good thought, good point.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely important. We discussed while you were gone that perhaps what we're hoping to do is the master plan changes would be at a higher, more distant level, but we also have to run the city, and we have to get a strategic plan for your department heads to have some direction and for you to manage. But it would be nice to work on both of them simultaneously so that we could make little subtle changes in the master plan. So I think that's a good suggestion.
yeah, really
Excellent.
important, thank you.
Yeah. And the fact that, I think we all are on alignment is we have to, obviously, the vision has to be, the vision of the master plan and the vision of the strategic plan have to be the vision.
Right.
The big vision of the city. And, of course, something we're going to do this year is much different than something that we want to have a 20-year horizon for. That's obviously very different.
Yeah, right. You get a city manager say, well.
So I heard another thing that we might want to do that might be useful is to look at the individual visions of what is in the master plan, not the detail of each master plan, but the vision statement of each chapter. Is there things that overlap each other that, in the master plan? Is there any kind of information in there that might be useful? The other opportunity to get information, I think it was Dr. Blake that said, what do we already have? Do we know where complaints come from or where accolades come from? And are there any themes there that would let us understand where we may be actually doing really well and our residents are really happy, or where is the dissatisfaction? Is there any pattern of it or whatever might be useful? So I think those are the kinds of things maybe we can work on to have for the next meeting to take a look at as we think about as putting meat on the bones.
Point.
I'm curious about the RFQs you're going to be sharing, and with appreciation for what Victoria did with the spreadsheet from other communities. Are some of the RFQs represented by these communities on the spreadsheet?
No, but let me see if I can track maybe a couple down from that spreadsheet. And yeah, so
Yeah. that's
these
good.
are actually from outside. The closest one is Foxborough, Massachusetts. So otherwise, everything else goes out to Ohio, Michigan, and Texas, Florida, things like that. So
Which are very different environments.
true.
And the one thing about the spreadsheet that Victoria provided, which resonated with me or not, was there's not a lot of information there because there's not a lot of doing this work. And so this may be, it's an opportunity. We might make the best model that other municipalities would want to follow, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
And I think we all agree we don't want something that ends up as a 170-page long
No.
read. This is what we're trying to consolidate around the specifics, priorities. Okay.
I think that's a pretty good agenda for the next meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Shall we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Sure.
That's it. Adjourned at 9:57.
Thank you, everyone. And 2 weeks from now, we agree?
Maybe we
wanna
can stretch
stay?
out a little further. I'm going to be away on vacation from the 25th. I'll be back after Labor Day.
Okay,
So, but this could continue with David Brooks competently so, but after that it'd be better.
The next regular meeting would be September 1st. Tuesday, September 1st, unless we're gonna skip that and come back on the 15th. First and third Wednesdays, or first and third Tuesdays.
which would be about a month out. Do we think we should meet on the 1st then?
I'd like to.
I think we have to keep the momentum going. And
Okay. We'll keep the momentum.
That's great. I can go back. I'll get my work done ahead of time and then I can go back and watch the video of it. And
Even if it's an abbreviated meeting on the 1st, I think it would be.
Yeah,
keep that
even, yeah, it doesn't, we never have to stay for an hour and a half if we only need a half an hour, so.
Right.
okay,
That sounds good.
thank you.
good. Thank you.
All right.